and the email, the web address for our website, the presentations, is also up there. So next one, please. Okay, so just go through some officer reports. I'll pull people up to give their slides. Next one. Last month we elected, no, we invested our post officers for this year. A few changes. So for those who weren't there, these are the names. So I'm standing in as Vice President for, sorry, I'm Vice President Brian Osborne, standing in for Scott Turigan. Proceed. Tim, do you want to talk about programs?
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, we have we've lined up a program for this year. Obviously, today will be from the Europe District, speaking about the Gebäudeenergiegesetz in Germany. Next month, we have an exciting program, CSRA. We hope to pull in Patty Bolton for that, and we have representation also from the Europe District. We'll be talking about structural proofing in Germany in April. In May or June, in May, we'll be talking about resiliency. Of course, on the 2nd of June, we have the golf tournament, and Ken will be speaking more to that in just a moment. In July, we'll be looking at the construction market outlook, so talking about things like inflation and supply chain constraints. And in August, we'll be looking to do ATFP presentation. Going into September, we have our normal STEM talk, TED Talk that we'll do probably just virtually because it is such a busy time of the year, and to give people a little bit more time. And then in October, we'll have our Centers of Excellence discussion, otherwise known as COE. We'll be talking about cyber resiliency and perhaps even combining those two into one. And then we also hope to do our normal holiday social in December. Brian, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Next slide. Okay. Chris Carloni, will
Yes, thank you. That's a little update on the membership. So we have 270 members in the post, and 7 new members in between January and February. So we welcome them, and you can see their names listed here. If there's any question or comments, just refer to me for membership updates. And if we move to the next slide, so we're growing, and we have 28 sustaining members that renew for 2023. We thank you for all your support. And there's 8 pending renewals, just probably going through the process. But whoever is not going, hasn't renewed yet, please do so, because we appreciate your support and we want you back. So this is the list of the companies that are supporting us. We see the 28, and then if we move to the second slide, we see the ones that are still pending. And so we want you back. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll come up here so people can probably hear me through the computer.
Nick Owen, please. There you go.
I'm not going to read through everything that's on the slide. If you do need the slide, let me know. If you want to ask questions about any of these individual things, there's a couple of opportunities for big things coming up over the next couple of months. The Joint Engineer Training Conference, which is in San Antonio, if you have an opportunity to be there. And then it's never too early to start thinking about the SAMI LDT program. The registration for this program is passed. The next one will start sometime in fall. So if you're interested in that, if you want to know what the requirements will be on your time to do it, reach out to me, please. There's some online stuff that I've put in here that's interesting stuff that I've seen come through. If you do see stuff that seems cool to you, go ahead and throw it to me, and I'll start trying to get this up here every month of stuff that's coming up. And then the last thing is I do want to try to continue Brian's program of getting people together outside of work in some way, shape, or form. I just don't have an idea yet. So I'm a shameless user of other people's good ideas. If you have one, again, let me know. And yeah, just that's at the bottom. If you have any questions or comments on mentoring or professional development, reach out. Back to you guys.
Okay, thanks, Nick. So Britta has can't join us today, so I'll just point out a couple of key deadlines we have. So we're currently we are going through the process of selecting students for scholarships. The information was sent out to schools. The deadline for applying for scholarships is 3rd of April 2023. Also, we've sent out information regarding engineering construction camps. Deadline for that is 15th of March 2023. So anybody who has interest or knows someone who would be interested in these, please pass that information on. So this is the
It's Chandler, and Chandler is online if we want Chandler, just a second.
Yeah,
Yep,
I'm
go
on.
ahead,
Just
Chandler. Yeah.
no real updates. This is just kind of business as usual from last time. We'll obviously always post stuff on the website, the recordings of the meetings, and hopefully in sometime soon we'll see an update to the website and we can refresh things. Over.
Excellent,
Okay,
thanks.
Chandler.
Good.
Okay.
Good, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Ken Staley, and in case you're wondering, yes, I do dress this way every day. We will be hosting our golf tournament this year on the 2nd of June. This will be my 10th year here. As you know, we have a theme every year at this post. Our theme this year is Ukraine. So we are asking everyone that attends in support of Ukraine to dress in the colors of the flag. Like, you don't have to wear the high socks though. Let's see. We will also have a separate donation box. So while this tournament will actually be sponsoring students and student programs, student scholarships, we will have a separate donation set up for a local charity supporting Ukrainian citizens. The flyer will be coming soon. Will look something like this. So begin putting together your teams, either 1 person, 2 person, 4 person teams for June 2nd. And we are always looking for industry sponsors. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, that's the end of the notices. Then I'll hand over to Tim to get into the technical presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Today's topic, we'll be talking about the new Gebäudeenergiegesetz in Germany. That's the Germany energy law, in case any of you don't speak German. And we are very fortunate today to have 2 of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Europe District's experts on this topic. We have Matt Wise, who's the Sustainability Program Manager at the Europe District, a mechanical engineer by trade. He is joined by Thomas Plankers, also a mechanical engineer with the Europe District. Thomas has been with the Europe District for
No,
not
I'm a mechanical since 1974.
since
I'm-
1974.
I'm
a
not
mechanical
working
engineer.
for the Corps since 1974.
So
It's a great difference, but it's 40 years in business.
fantastic. Obviously, a wealth of experience that we have here presenting on this topic. So I'll hand it over to Matt. Matt, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for the very nice introduction. I think relatively late last year, Thomas and I began putting together a flow chart to try to summarize the requirements of the German Energy Code. And really looking to do this really primarily for our internal staff to improve the understanding internally, help make sure that we're capturing requirements early in project development, appropriately accounting for potential costs and challenges that would come with the project that must be permitted in Germany and meet these laws. And I'd say even more broadly, probably one of the reasons why to do an activity like this, and I can see from the agenda for the coming months, is that there are aspects in the building industry that are very consistent, don't change a lot from year to year, but sustainability, ATFP, cybersecurity, resiliency, these are all topics that are in great flux and the reasons that we talk about these. And then, of course, as already mentioned today, the Ukraine conflict, driven largely by energy crisis. And so talking about sustainability, energy conservation, renewable energy feeds into that quite well as well. So we can jump to the next slide. So we're going to talk high-level overview on U.S. and host nation requirements related to energy conservation for our facilities projects. We're going to use the Gebäudeenergiegesetz, German Building Energy Law or Building Energy Act to do that. We're going to talk some about the applicability in terms of what kind of projects. We're going to focus really on what would be typical U.S. Army Corps of Engineer projects, from new construction, major renovation, minor renovation. Would apply a caveat that the law does include some requirements for existing buildings that maybe a residential landlord might have to comply with, but we're not going to focus on that today. And then we're going to talk a bit about timelines, how the Gebäudeenergiegesetz documentation and compliance feeds into the projects in terms of when the project was started, when it was permitted, and then also how it fits in with a typical design timeline in terms of 35%, 65%, and so on. I guess broadly here, is everyone sort of familiar with the Gebäudeenergiegesetz? Is this a totally new topic for anybody in the room? Sorry, Nick, maybe not for you guys and Tammy. But is the room relatively familiar with the energy law or energy laws broadly? Wonderful.
More or
So,
less.
Next slide will be really review for everyone, but just to kind of get a baseline, mostly for Nick. Sorry, everybody else has to bear with us. So from the U.S. side, we have a couple of federal laws that have dictated how federal buildings with energy conservation, and this would be EPAC from 2005 and ESA from 2007. EPAC from 2005 uses the ASHRAE 90.1 baseline and requires that our new construction, major renovation projects achieve a 30% reduction relative to that code required minimum baseline. Building upon these federal laws, there's a sustainability UFC that reinforces that 30% requirement. There's an IMCOM Europe policy generally prohibiting comfort cooling air conditioning in Europe, aside from Italy, and with some other caveats. And then both the Army and the Air Force maintain sustainability policies that, again, reinforce this 30% energy conservation requirement and bring in some third-party platforms to help certify that the projects achieve their broadly sustainability goals, but the energy conservation is a big part of that. And mention those just that it's not just for all of our projects, it's generally not just the design team or the USACE personnel, but there's additional third-party review of energy conservation. And then we move into some of the right. Am I right? Is that right? Okay, right-hand side of the slide. Some of the kind of unique things that USACE Europe District works under, and all of our projects within Europe do. Broadly, there's a handful of European Parliament directives that set up energy conservation requirements for European Parliament members. We're going to talk in a bit more detail in the coming slides on the Germany law. But the Germany law seeks to comply with these European Parliament's directives, as does the Belgium laws and the Italy laws. And so conceptually, a lot of what we'll go over today applies to the projects in most of the countries that we're doing work in. Next slide, please. And please jump in when I mess up.
No problem. I will.
Okay. Quick high-level overview. The Gebäudeenergiegesetz became law in November of 2020. It was not a totally new concept. It combined the requirements of two existing laws, NEV, which dealt with energy conservation, and A-Varmagay, which required implementation of renewable energy. There's been an upgrade to the requirements of the Gebäudeenergiegesetz that happened in January of this year. And there's another planned upgrade that will come into effect in a little bit less than 2 years.
I will jump in. So the Gebäudeenergiegesetz from 2020 stated you only have the ability to use 75% of the energy consumption from the reference building. The reference building in the European directives and in the German energy law always stays the same. So the update for the GEG 2023 stated you only have to use 55% of the energy consumption from the reference building. And the next update on 2025 will tell us to use only 40% of the reference building. That's different to ASHRAE. ASHRAE, they always, I will say, decrease the reference building, but the reference building in the German law and in the European laws stays always the same. That's a bit different.
We're going to build upon what Thomas just mentioned in 10 minutes or so. Yeah, some of the difference between the US and the European requirements. Kind of come back around, Gebäudeenergiegesetz broadly seeks to provide near net zero buildings, and it does that with two steps. First step is reducing energy consumption, and that's the energy consumption associated with the heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, domestic hot water generation, and built-in lighting systems for non-residential buildings. And then the second step is to requires renewable energy to cover a portion of the heating and cooling energy demand of buildings. And we're going to build upon this. This is the higher level kind of general theme of the presentation. We'll be zooming in and zooming out. We're zoomed out pretty far right now. Next slide is zooming in slightly more. Going to switch in a moment to a little bit more detailed flow chart. But when we're kind of viewing the flow chart at a level where we can read the text in it, we won't be able to see the whole thing. And so this is an overview map of where we're going to head. Flowchart's going to start off with kind of some steps of determining if Gebäudeenergiegesetz applies to a specific project. Then it's going to, for those projects that it does require apply to, we're going to talk through the requirements that apply to all projects, independent of what the scope is. And then the Gebäudeenergiegesetz splits and has separate requirements for new construction projects. That's in the orange on the slide here, if you're able to see colors. And it's a split for new construction on the left in orange. And the other split is for renovation of existing building projects. Within renovations, there's an additional split for minor renovation projects and major renovation projects. More details coming. Jump to the next slide or to the Word file with the flowchart. Thank you. Good way to start. Yeah, so start at the start here. That's a great place to start. Thank you. So first thing, it's building energy law applies to building projects. And so the Corps of Engineers does a number of projects that might be hard stands, parking lots, site lighting, and these projects would be excused from the requirements of the Gebäudeenergiegesetz. The next step, the top middle blue, would be the permitting date. So the permitting generally occurs around 35% design. Our active projects are probably out of this already. But there may be some projects that are finishing up design now that were permitted under NEV and A Varmagay. As we continue to move around clockwise, blue, Gebäudeenergiegesetz excuses buildings that are not heated or cooled. So maybe some of our warehouses would not need to apply with the requirements. There's an additional excuse for religious buildings. Haven't seen too many of these in my time with the Corps of Engineers. Have done a very preliminary planning charrette for a chapel in Belgium, so something like that may come up. And then the last one, that kind of excused project or project with potentially less requirements within the Gebäudeenergiegesetz would be a temporary building. And that would be less than 2 years life within the law. As mentioned earlier, this is intended for the typical USACE projects. There's some additional building types that are excused, but We don't really see those with USACE. A quick caveat here is that though with religious buildings and temporary buildings, though a lot of the energy modeling, energy conservation requirements are lightened, that there is still going to be a requirement for commissioning and functional testing of buildings. Okay, so then we move down to pretty much all other buildings, Gebäudeenergiegesetz, or all other projects, Gebäudeenergiegesetz is going to apply in some way. Thomas mentioned some of the charms or nice things about the law, I think, relative to some of the American requirements. This is another one. Same laws for residential and non-residential buildings. The next block down does a good summary again of what we talked about on the previous slides about builds upon these European Parliament directives and 2 steps, energy conservation and renewable energy to offset some of the heating and cooling demand. Within the Gebäudeenergiegesetz, there are a few caveats. One of them would waive some of the requirements if they can be demonstrated to be not life cycle cost effective. Have seen, or maybe somebody on the line or in the room will speak up, that there's a Baumholder housing renovation project. Within the law, there's a requirement to boost some of the insulation on the floor. Because of the floor structure, existing piping, the cost was thought to be quite high for that element. And so I believe it's AECOM was going to provide a narrative to support this is not a life cycle cost effective energy measure to include in the building. But that's the only one that I've seen go down that path. We're continuing slightly farther down to this HVAC and domestic hot water block. And if you're if you're familiar with kind of US energy requirements, ASHRAE 90.1, probably any other country, none of this is going to come as a surprise. It's Gebäudeenergiegesetz is going to prescribe minimum energy performance for your major mechanical equipment and systems. Going to look for energy efficient boilers. It prescribes some of the sequences of operations that must be incorporated into the automatic control systems. It's going to want pumps to include variable frequency drives. It's going to provide some fan power limitations for ventilation systems. So making sure that the ratios of static pressure in your duct distribution system versus the airflow that you're pushing through is not energy wasting. It's going to prescribe requirements, minimum insulation requirements for heating and chilled water and domestic hot water piping. This is a pretty easy thing to do a comparison with ASHRAE 90.1, the US requirements. For heating piping, they're very comparable. The Gebäudeenergiegesetz is slightly better. For chilled water, the ASHRAE 90.1 requirement is an instance where the ASHRAE requirement exceeds what's in the Gebäudeenergiegesetz. Pausing, see if there's any questions or concerns. I can scan down slightly farther. So the commissioning and acceptance testing, note again, overlap with US requirements here. And note that before we mentioned the caveats with the religious buildings or temporary buildings, some of the requirements of the Gebäudeenergiegesetz get waived for those. These are non-waivable, making sure energy consuming equipment is installed properly and functions properly is required, period, independent of the building type. Yeah, to avoid reading everything on the slide, again, checking to make sure that the components associated with energy consumption were installed properly, that they are functioning properly. Overlap here with some hydraulic balancing and airflow balancing requirements from other deans. Yeah, that's probably my good summary to avoid reading.
Mm-hmm.
Keep scrolling down a bit. And now we get to the split, where there's the Gebäudeenergiegesetz seeks to recognize that can have a lot more influence on a new building without all the constraints that come with an existing building. Start with going down slightly farther, and that gets to the next page of the Word file. And we'll begin with new construction, just the more intensive requirements. The Gebäudeenergiegesetz is going to require energy modeling. The DIN that it based its energy modeling on is 18599. And this DIN for energy modeling, it's going to consider the heating, energy consumption, domestic hot water generation, ventilation, cooling for non-residential buildings, built-in lighting. It's going to include a credit for renewable energy systems, and it's going to prescribe minimum envelope performance, so insulation, thermal bridges, and building tightness. For those that might be familiar with ASHRAE 90.1, some of the deviation here is that the Gebäudeenergiegesetz specifically does not consider energy associated with the cooling of data processing loads. So I think like our Hohenfels Sim Center, for those involved with that project, there is a data center there that would be excluded from the Gebäudeenergiegesetz calculation. Spaces that are semi-heated, less than 12 degrees Celsius, and plug-in process loads. The excluding of plug-in process loads overlaps really nicely with EPACT, which also does that. So looking to recognize that that's really outside of the building design's control. Scroll down slightly farther. So mentioned some of the charms or really wonderful things that the Gebäudeenergiegesetz does is that it uses the same process for both residential and non-residential buildings, but just prescribes separate characteristics for the baseline of those two buildings. So it doesn't require learning a different energy model process, doesn't require learning a different law, different code, same law, same code, same process, just different prescribed baseline. Slight caveat to that is that through the end of this calendar year, the residential buildings can use a separate DIN to do the energy modeling. And then under really simple building characteristics, there is an allowance to do a simplified single zone energy model within the Gebäudeenergiegesetz. Not going to apply to a lot of our projects, but kind of no comfort cooling, that is common. Single heating system, single domestic hot water system for all spaces, and the lighting must be energy efficient. As Thomas summarized before, and kind of already mentioned, these charms are these things that I really like about the Gebäudeenergiegesetz relative to the American requirements, is that beginning in 2020, the design building was required to achieve relative to the baseline, consume no more than 75% of the energy that the baseline prescribed building does. Beginning early this year, that jumped to the design building can be consume no more than 55% of what the prescribed baseline building does. And there'll be another upgrade to that to 40% of the prescribed building in 25. And if you're familiar with ASHRAE 90.1 and kind of how the UFCs have done it, they've held the 30% improvement requirement, but every maybe 5-6 years, they adjust the ASHRAE baseline. So the current one is the ASHRAE version 2013. This spring, that'll make a jump to the 2019 version, and changing the baseline means learning a new code. For myself, that's my own personal complaint. I'm not sure if your technical engineers will have similar feelings. Keep going, scrolling down. The Gebäudeenergiegesetz prescribes envelope requirements for new construction. So it's going to require tightness testing. Overlaps really nicely with US requirements in terms of building envelope commissioning. Prescribed minimum envelope performance for insulation, avoiding thermal bridges and tightness. And then just a kind of summary comparison here relative to ASHRAE 90.1 that the Gebäudeenergiegesetz envelope requirements are going to exceed the ASHRAE 90.1 baseline for Germany. And then, Thank you. And then the kind of the step 2. So we've talked now about the energy conservation requirements, renewable energy requirement. We're looking to offset the heating and cooling energy of the building. So we've calculated the heating energy cooling using this DEAN 18599. And we're going to have to provide for some renewable energy, can be from a combination of the sources listed here. For the Americans in the audience, it's kind of important to note some of the, for me at least, it's important to note some of the differences from what Americans might typically consider renewable energy. So a big one of those could be like the last one there, that the increasing the envelope beyond the baseline up to 15%. If you increase the baseline by 15%, that would satisfy this requirement. You could take a credit for the renewable energy at the district heat provider. Kaiserslautern provides a great deal of combined heat and power at their the district heat provider does, and so our projects there get a great credit from that. And then also the environmental heat, I think the third bullet down. So not just geothermal ground source heat pump, but also heat pumps that are air to water, air to air heat pump systems. Also look to comply with this requirement. And the final note for the renewable energy that I'd make is that just reminding that when we talked about the energy conservation, that our buildings get a double credit for this. So we get both the kind of reduction of the overall building by providing renewable energy, and we seek to comply with this requirement as well, both in step 1 and step 2. Not sure if I worded that quite well enough, but renewable energy provides a double benefit in our projects within the Gebäudeenergiegesetz. Maybe scroll up a little bit and try going down the green side. So renovation of existing buildings, again, sets up similar requirements for non-residential and residential, different baseline for those two building types. In 23, so earlier this year in January, really minimal adjustments to the 2020 requirements, but more significant upgrades are anticipated at the 25 issuance of the Gebäudeenergiegesetz. Scrolling down slightly, the boilers. This is looking to encourage projects to replace older boilers that may not be operating energy efficiently. There are a number of caveats that go into this that would get a project around it. Within Germany, a lot of our projects are not using boilers. We're frequently on district heat systems. It's probably pretty light for us.
But also for the boilers for the district heat has to be younger than 30 years.
Thank you. And then for some envelope requirements, I mentioned the housing project, renovation of Army family housing at Baumholder, and its insulation at the floor, because at the ground floor level, the basement level was mechanical and storage space, relatively unheated. So there's a requirement to provide insulation separating those spaces. Slight aside there, but the Gebäudeenergiegesetz wants us to look at providing additional insulation at the roof level. Does include the cap for renovation projects that, in addition to the life cycle cost effectiveness, that do not create conflicts with other codes. So don't create a life safety, don't create a fire hazard. That we're not looking to override any of those life safety requirements with a energy conservation requirement. Broadly, Gebäudeenergiegesetz is going to look to have any kind of modified envelope components comply with the baseline requirements of the Gebäudeenergiegesetz. And then as we kind of go farther down, we've got a split for major renovation and minor renovation. The Gebäudeenergiegesetz uses the percentage of modifications to an envelope components area as the kind of threshold or line between a major renovation and a minor renovation. So we start with the left-hand side green box, the if greater than 10% of an envelope components area is modified. This would be the major renovation. It's going to require that our envelope modifications do not downgrade the envelope performance, so that do no harm. And that waiver that I just mentioned, don't create kind of conflicts with structural systems or life safety systems by trying to comply with the energy requirements. Go further down. Well, sorry, we're getting a little bit messy with panning through a flow chart. Go to further splits. We're still in the major renovation category. The top box for residential buildings, where we're affecting more than 10% of the envelope. Gebäudeenergiegesetz is going to require an energy model, just like it would for new construction. The deviation from new construction is that we use the exact same baseline building, but now instead of being required to save 75% or 55%, or excuse me, not save, but to consume 75% of the energy that the reference building would use, or 55% of the energy that the reference building would use, now we can use 40% more, up to 40% more than the reference building of a residence. So we use the exact same reference building, but the allowance for energy consumption is a little bit more friendly, considering the challenges of a renovation. And then on top of that, there are some prescribed minimal heat loss transmission factors for envelope components. Going further down, non-residential buildings, quite similar to the residential path, going to be pushed into doing an energy model again. Going to use the exact same energy model that we would if we, or exact same baseline and modeling procedure that we would if it was new construction. But again, we can, our design building can be 40% worse than the reference building. And again, minimum envelope performance in terms of thermal transmission is prescribed. The factor is a little bit different, that we can be 1.25 times the prescribed building's envelope performance. Now panning back up to the minor renovation category. This is probably the most challenging conceptually in terms of categories. So again, the Gebäudeenergiegesetz is using this kind of 10% modification of an envelope components area as their threshold for major and minor renovation. If a project involves modifying less than 10%, or up to 10% of an envelope area's component, then it's going to kind of forgive the energy requirements of the envelope. So the new work can be exactly what was there before. And it's not going to prescribe the minimum envelope performance of those components. Okay. Please.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
So a lot of your projects in Germany are renovation projects in sustainability. Most of the renovations to the exterior envelope is usually the energy requirements for the purpose. Are you finding that those types of projects are less than 10%? Are they considered minor until renovations? Or
Let me just repeat the question, if I can, just for our audience online. The question was, most of the Europe districts projects are renovations, and when we talk about the outside envelope, a lot of times we're replacing the windows. So are we finding that it is above or below the 10% threshold?
In my mind, always above the 10% threshold, but you can sum it, can calculate it. If you change the windows, you are less than 10%. And the idea is pretty shitty to do 2 windows this year and 2 windows another year. So it's just, people would avoid this work. No, it's more than 10%. It's a major renovation, and then you have to bring up the building. to complete code.
And that was going to be my question, but I didn't want to interrupt. Are you finding that even the government or the contractors, are they trying to work the work into less percent, or what's your experience with that?
The experience right now is that I saw in a lot of design reviews that with direct projects,
Mhm.
I don't get a design according to GEG.
That was going to be my next question.
That's one of the
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why I started this explosive
Right,
for our designers.
right, understand.
So I'd say in like a scoping or planning phase, this is probably an area that we recognize that we need to improve upon is discussing and considering these requirements much earlier in the project. And so I can think of one project offhand that I know was replacing windows on one side of the building, and we were looking at, this is prior to the Gebäudeenergiegesetz, so the NEV had a similar threshold. Offhand, I can't remember if 10% was still used then, but I do remember counting the envelopes and looking at the area of the envelope, and were we crossing that threshold? I have not seen that yet come through with this, but it's not hard to imagine that coming up. And so part of the goal with trying to create some kind of summary of the Gebäudeenergiegesetz requirements was to help our planning teams work with customers early in the project so that the concepts as they bring them in, they recognize that those triggers that they're hitting. And so ATFP is something that gets discussed pretty regularly with the number of occupants in the building, the scope of what's going on with the envelope. And so this is another one that we need to be considering, and probably an area of improvement that we can do during the planning stage.
Walls and the 6-sided box essentially.
Yeah.
So you add a bulk expiration, but then you figure out what it's less than percent.
And I would probably something that I should have given probably towards the beginning of the presentation is it's sort of a weird topic for me to talk about being an American, and the Corps of Engineers is not the police of the Gebäudeenergiegesetz. It's a host nation law, and so it's the permitting office, the German permitting office is the police of this. And so our teammates kind of goal with presenting this and putting together a document with this is to aid our projects with reducing risk later on, that through the permitting that something gets caught. And so that's really where my focus is to try and catch these things earlier on, to help kind of during planning before, as we're developing scopes of work and RFPs, that this is considered before it gets to our design partner, AE design partners, and then someone on the back end to help our designs that within this law, there's options of compliance. And so there's not prescribed, you must do PV panels, you must do district heat, that's not prescribed. And so depending upon the project, there may be a path that helps achieve multiple goals that customer has or the user has, and that helps us stay in other competing goals, stay in budget, stay in schedule, and comply with the law. I'm not sure if I answered either question.
Oh, yeah,
I just said some words, but
Yeah, even the GEG is touching a different discipline. So you also have the structural, for if you do an installation of a roof, you have the electrical, you have the architectural with the envelope requirements, and last but not least, you have the mechanical and the sustainability. So we have different disciplines involved in this GEG. But the mechanical starts to fight for it.
and then I haven't done it yet, but a little shout out to the SKE's design team on a recent project brought to our attention that there's a Baden-Württemberg specific law. So our projects in Stuttgart, that's going to independent of what's going on at the district heat, which often meets our renewable energy requirements. It's going to prescribe photovoltaics or solar domestic hot water requirements on both new construction and major renovation projects. So that's something that I know that I at some point need to add to here to help our internal teams, but I thought I'd mention as well here.
Yeah, this regulation stated for not only, this is only stated for Baden-Württemberg. So whatever you do on the roof, new construction or major renovation, you have to be 60%, 60% of your roof area has to be PV. And yeah, we have to learn in 60% of your roof area has to be PV or solar thermal. So, and we have, that's, I will say, a different, because the GEG is for all Germany, but we have additional state-wise climate protection acts. So this climate protection act in Hesse is different from Baden-Württemberg, it's different from Bavaria, it's different from Rheinland-Pfalz, it's different from North Rhine-Westphalia. So all the design companies working on different projects have to take a look into this state-specific climate protection act, because the requirements may be different. But I will be satisfied if you do 100% of the building envelope using renewables. Then I'm good.
Meet the laws.
Yeah, we have to go into net zero, because who's the biggest energy consumption around the world? It's all our buildings. And the organization with the biggest energy consumption is the DoD. So we have to improve our footprint.
So we can go back to the PowerPoint. That's okay. Yeah. So you can share the slides and the flow chart. At the bottom of the flow chart is my translation of the Gebäudeenergiegesetz into English for an American, I guess. I'm very sorry. I'm not going to work for you at all. To try and summarize the requirements and put in the paragraph numbers to expand upon kind of the shorthand that's in the flow chart. So bringing this kind of back around to our kind of timeline for our typical projects, and what we'd like to see for relative to the Gebäudeenergiegesetz. And again, this is we're not the police of German laws, but we are tasked with delivering projects, and we're looking to take down a barrier that could come up during permitting. And so ideally at the design charrette level, kind of a team member that's aware of the Gebäudeenergiegesetz, broadly energy conservation, renewable energy requirements, and has a plan to comply with both the US and the host nation codes, depending upon the project. At 35%, this is when it would go to permitting. So this would be the Gebäudeenergiegesetz analysis should be complete at the 35% and ready to submit for permit. ASHRAE 90.1 energy model, additionally, to provide value for the projects, needs to be done early so that requirements can be brought in and communicated to the rest of the design team. And then for kind of within those splits of the flow chart for the minor renovation projects that we can excuse an energy model, maybe a couple of sentences just says, this is a minor renovation because we're not touching the envelope. Our mechanical equipment's going to comply with the prescribed elements of the Gebäudeenergiegesetz, so that the team is aware of the law and is complying with the components of it that affect the project. 65% design. Hopefully at this stage, the Gebäudeenergiegesetz and ASHRAE 90.1 energy modelers have have communicated all their requirements to the different disciplines within the design team. And those requirements are making it into the design documents. And then for our projects that are seeking a LEED or third-party certification, potentially some adjustments to the ASHRAE 90.1 energy model occur late in projects, if there are changes. And then that's last slide was, I think, if I gave you the correct version, just contact information for myself and Thomas.
But let's talk about reality. So when the energy consumption or the requirements for energy consumption decrease all time year by year. So right now we are by 55%. Maybe in less than 2 years, we are only by 40% using on the building envelope. So what is the reality for our mechanical design? Get away from radiator heating, go into in-floor heating, lower the temperatures. For residential, non-residential buildings, we have to think more and more about mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. Otherwise, we can afford and we can ensure this less energy consumption. That's part of that. So no more pellet boilers, get more to heat pumps feed by PV panels. That is the future for our buildings. In renovation-wise or non-renovation, new construction-wise. And for all the mechanicals in the room, in the middle of March, it's about 2 weeks, the ISH, the big trade fair for ventilation, sanitary, and heating, is going on in Frankfurt the whole week. So we will see the new, whatever it is, regulations, BMS, all the new equipment, and I'm pretty sure we will not see a lot of old oil boilers. So, as we do business since a lot of years, let us do business into innovation future, not doing it like we did it the last 50 years, because we don't have to change our mind. We don't have to change our behavior. We have to look into the future to reduce the energy if we want to live anymore on this planet. Climate change is not an exception, and the US Army is not excused out of that. We have no waiver.
That is an excellent way maybe to kind of wrap up with we have no waiver. So you also have no waiver on not asking questions. I will open it up to online. I'll take the speaker off mute in case anybody online. Nobody has written any questions into the chat. Maybe just to get us going a little bit, Thomas, you mentioned this a little bit, as did you, Matt. If there were two things that the industry, AE community could do better, what would that be?
I don't want to see any more design based on only American standards, all calculation presented in imperial units. I want to see a design based on European standards, and it's pretty easy to use a European standard in 37 countries because the baseline is always the same, and just we have different national annexes. So in Germany, we use the DIN EN, let's say 806 for potable water. And in Poland, we use the same, but it's called PN EN 806. So, and if you go to Albania, you call this SSH EN 806. So the baseline is the same, but we have different national annexes. So when I open up a design analysis for a project in Germany, and I see starting the list with BSEN, I will close because it's British standard, not German standard. You get, no, I don't look anybody special.
We do have a Brit in the room. Yeah, we won't mention any names though.
No,
Yeah.
it's for all. It's for all. It's for all our designers because sometimes also adult kids should learn the lesson that we have to innovate. We can't stay back in the 60s. It was pretty nice years, but we are in the 2000s. So, and the difference is in the 60s and in the 70s, people like me as a mechanical, they learned how to weld a copper pipe, and today they're present.
Very good. Just to translate a little bit, adult kid in German means old dog in English. So I count myself as that. Old dogs can learn new tricks. I think that's
Yeah.
what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
No, that's excellent. Good. Matt, any input on what can we do better?
The challenges that we've seen sort of with the Gebäudeenergiegesetz and what Thomas is referencing, I think, and Tammy and Nick may jump in here too, is that traditionally a very high percentage of our projects within Germany were done through the indirect process. And so the local German governments, the Bauamts, would hire a design team, would hire a Gebäudeenergiegesetz or NEV and AVARMG modeler, and they would do all the permitting for us. And then several years ago, for a variety of reasons that aren't very important, we started doing a higher percentage of direct projects. And so with that, I think comes somewhat of a learning curve with bringing in some of these requirements. Broadly, I don't think there's the physics. So Thomas and I talk about a lot. The physics don't change, and so the really energy efficient building in Kentucky is going to be an energy efficient building in Stuttgart. The laws and the codes to get to energy efficiency have the really aligned goals, and the strategy is similar but not the same. And so it's for me, from generally speaking, there's some outliers, but the challenge is just documenting compliance with the local requirements, and considering them early. Like ASHRAE 90.1 could be satisfied without renewable energy at all, and that would be a problem for Gebäudeenergiegesetz.
Good. I have another question, but before I take up the whole air in the room, I would invite any other. Nothing online. How well do you see? Oh, sorry, Brian. Oh, yes, we have somebody with their hand up online. Go ahead.
Hey, this is Florian speaking from Copeland Engineering Company.
Hello, Florian.
Hey, I'd like to ask a question.
Please.
I like mechanical engineers very much.
Oh my God.
I hope so.
To say first, but I saw for the last 10 years, especially as this new GEG was started, let's say, the ventilation systems are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and all this stuff is more complicated to use it. Okay, so I'm always thinking on the person who has to adjust those special devices. Let's say the facility manager or whoever. So we are also working for the private sector, and we see that a lot of buildings that are built new, so no repair work, but new buildings made as low-tech buildings, but also have to, of course, be energy efficiency and has to comply with the GEG. So my question is this also something which might be used in future USACE projects where it fits? Thank you, sir.
I think the question is low tech.
Yeah. So yes, yeah. So broadly for new construction projects, and probably for a high percentage of major renovation ones as well, we do try to employ life cycle cost analysis during design to consider not just the energy consumption over the life and the first cost, but also the ongoing maintenance costs of systems. There are some requirements within the US UFCs to use technology that's been existing for several years in use in the local market. What you're pointing out, though, is admittedly a big challenge, that the energy codes continue to become more demanding. That generally is going to mean more complex and sensitive mechanical systems. I think broadly with this life cycle cost analysis, the goal is to kind of hit a lot, find a place that meets the law, but also doesn't excessively overtax the local maintenance staff.
But also the local maintenance staff has to innovate themselves.
Right. So I'm hearing maybe a no or.
Yeah.
Florian, excellent
Good
question.
summary.
No, thank you for that. We talked a little bit about the end users. In your experience, how open, because a lot of this drives cost, right? There's costs associated with this, savings associated with it as well. Certainly, maybe even some other savings that aren't necessarily calculated immediately. How open are the end users towards the, they may not even be aware of this, but how are they dealing with it?
I will see it this way. On the 24th of February last year, the last end user should know that we have to change our behavior. When you have a look on the gas prices, on the oil prices, on the electrical energy prices, this is the answer. Innovate or fall apart back. Yes, it rises the first cost, but we have to calculate American taxpayers' money and dollar for the next 25 to 30 years. So, and nobody can say the gas price will come back where it was before. Oh no, never ever this will be happen. That's the answer.
No, and I think maybe that's an appropriate place to wrap up, to kind of finish where we started with our moment of silence, and then the awareness of February 24th and what happened on that day and the world implications that we face. And GEG is a way for us to get there. So
yeah, but only in Germany, you have to follow more or less the same rules in all other European countries. So you have to have you have some more or less the same regulations in Poland, in Italy, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in all other countries all over Europe. Don't forget that.
very good. Excellent. No, thank you very much. And Brian, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Thomas and Matt. Really excellent, very technical presentation, I gotta admit. I think we're gonna see a lot of visits to the website to look at the slides. I think what you presented there is going to be a great resource for a lot of engineers, a lot of people that are explaining to their US colleagues that you can't do it that way. You have to follow this way. So I think, thank you very, very much. And just like to present you with our post coins, and thank you very much for coming to see us. Thank you for taking your time, have your schedules. Really excellent. And I think we could. Okay, so thanks very much. That concludes our meeting today. Our next meeting is the 23rd of March.
Correct.
Back to Thursday. And CSR.
Yes, all right.
Cost schedule risk assessments. So thanks a lot, everybody, for joining us online. Thank you for coming to Wiesbaden. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining. Thank you for your comment for us as well. Thank you very much for us. Sorry. Thank you.